Hello world, Krista here with Books and Jams, and today I am going to tell you about my least and most favorite books from 2016. You may be tired at this point of seeing people's best and worst books of the year, but I figure it's not quite January 15th yet, so I'm still within the first half of the new month of the new year, and I wanted to just wrap it up with this favorites video because even though I just did a bookish survey a couple days ago, I didn't get to talk too long about the books that I really liked. And I didn't talk really at all about the books that I didn't like. So I wanted to take a few minutes today and just run through them quickly with you. I'm not going to spend overly amounts of time, but I would like to share with you why I liked each one or didn't like them. First off, I'll start with my least favorite, get the negative out of the way so we can spend some more time on the favorites. And I just wanted to say that these were not necessarily bad books by any means, but they were just books either that I had high expectations for and they didn't live up to them, or they just weren't books that captured my interest for some reason or other. But you may enjoy them, and I know some people do like the books that I was not a fan of this year. So without further ado, let's start with my least favorites. In no particular order, the 5 books that I did not really enjoy are The Fifth Wave by Yancy. I knew this was a book about aliens, so I knew it was going to have that science fiction feel to it. And this was actually not that bad. It just really didn't do anything for me. I didn't really care that much. Sorry, Fifth Wave lovers out there. I do still want to see the movie, strangely. I think I may enjoy the movie, but the book was just meh for me. Another book that I didn't like is Catcher in the Rye by JD Salinger. And this is a classic, and I'm sure many of you love it. But I just got so annoyed with Holden Caulfield by the end of the book. I couldn't wait for it to be over. Not very much happens overall. His attitude really irritated me by the end of the book, and I couldn't wait for it to be over. Another book that I really didn't love this year is Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, and I rediscovered mysteries this year. I used to read a lot more mystery when I was in high school and in college, but it's been quite a while since I've read some mysteries, so I've been really enjoying picking up some new mysteries. And so I chose Woman in Cabin 10 as one of my choices for Book of the Month Club. It's about this woman who is on a yacht. She hears and thinks she sees someone being thrown overboard and murdered in the cabin next to her, which is obviously Cabin 10. But then when she starts asking around, there's nobody who is in that room. So the mystery is, did she really see anything? What really happened? But she is set up from the beginning as having anxiety and being super tired and having had too much to drink. So they set her up already as a really unreliable narrator. But I just didn't care. I felt like the people around her were obnoxious, and I didn't like the way the characters were described or the way their interactions were with each other. I just didn't care. Even when the climax happened, I was like, this is it. I was kind of sad. And then it wrapped up really quickly at the end in a very unfulfilling way for me. So I just didn't enjoy Women in Cabin 10. But I know other people did, so that's just my opinion. Another book that I actually chose from the Book of the Month Club subscription box is Before the Fall by Noah Hawley, I believe. This was another sort of mystery about a plane crash that happens. There are 9 people on the plane crashes, and the only 2 who survive are the painter, who wasn't supposed to be on the plane to begin with, but he was, and the 4-year-old son of one of the couples that was on the plane. So that sounded like a good premise to me. I was excited to read it and find out what happened, but it ended up being mostly about media and how the media impacts people's opinions and the people's ideas of what's right and wrong, which is very relevant in our day and age. But it just got too, it pontificated too much about the wrongness of how the media twists things or only takes part of the story. And while part of it might be truth, it's not the whole truth. And so it was really irritating and not at all what I expected. So it was not among my favorites of the year. The 5th book is going to be an unpopular opinion. Probably the biggest unpopular opinion in this list, and that is The Diviners by Libba Bray. Now, I should know better because I am not a fan of paranormal at all. I'm not a fan of the supernatural in books. I listened to it on audiobook. It was a little bit on the scary side. It's not super scary, but for me, it was a little bit on the scary side, and I didn't like that. But the thing that probably irritated me the most, I'm thinking this book is set in the 20s. It's going to be really cool. I loved that there was a lot of diversity in it. It was interesting in that respect. Different characters from different walks of life and different ethnicities. That was interesting, and I liked the idea of reading a book set in the 20s, but the language was so annoying. I know some people love that about this book, but if she added ski onto the end of one more word, it got super annoying. Just the 20s language that was kind of inserted in. It just, I don't know if maybe it's realistic to the time, but it was really annoying to listen to. So I did not have any desire to continue on with Lair of Dreams, and it was definitely among the bottom of my list for 2016. So, don't hate me, don't unsubscribe, but those were my least favorites of the year. And now I'm going to move on to the books that I really loved this year. And I did sort of rank these, and I have 10, but some are series and some are just books written by the same author. So I will include those kind of together. So at number 10, I have Blackmore and Edenbrooke by Julianne Donaldson. Blackmore is set in England in the 1820s. It's about a girl named Kate who is feeling very independent and wants to travel to India. She has a mother who really just wants her to settle down and get married. So she ends up making a deal with her mother that when she receives and rejects 3 marriage proposals, then her mom will allow her to go to India. So along the way, we meet Henry, who is Kate's really good friend. Another boy enters the picture. There's I guess a little bit of a love triangle going on, which I know some people are not a fan of, but this book just made me smile and I really loved it. The other book by Julianne Donaldson that I love is Edenbrooke, and this one it's a little bit more like a gothic kind of romance. Marianne is dying to just escape the boredom that she's experiencing in Bath. She gets an opportunity to travel to the estate of her sister's fiance's house or something along those lines. And it's a case of mistaken identity along the way, and it's just a lot of fun. They do have a Jane Austen-esque feel to them. I just really enjoyed reading them this year, so they made it to number 10 on my list. Number 9 is, again, 2 books, and it's An Ember in the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night, both by Sabaa Tahir. This is an action-packed series centered around Leigh, who is a member of the Scholar class. Her brother was taken to prison, and she ends up joining the resistance in order to have them help her rescue her brother. We also meet Elias, who is a mask, which is part of the elite military, and they encounter each other, and it's their story mainly. It's kind of set in a Romanesque type of world. It has a lot of nods to ancient Rome, gladiator type world, which was very interesting to read about. I liked Ember in the Ashes, but I really loved A Torch Against the Night. I think the action picked up even more. The villains in A Torch Against the Night were so incredibly well done. Even in this one, the Commandant is one of the villains, and she is just pure evil, which is fantastic for this book. She was just written so well. The narrator of these books was fantastic. It's the same in both, and there are different voices for Leigh's chapters and Elias. The Warden is another character that the narrator just did a spectacular job narrating his parts. The voice that was used for the Warden just crawled up inside of me. It was so gross, and it just made my skin cringe. Oh, it was horrible. In a fantastic way. I kind of loved it. There were some surprises in A Torch Against the Night that blew me away. I was just so engrossed in the story that I wasn't trying to think ahead and figure out what was going on, so it took me completely by surprise, which I loved. Yes, A Torch Against the Night and An Ember in the Ashes. I enjoyed those very much. Number 8 is a whole series, and it is the Lunar Chronicles. Cinder was not my favorite of the bunch, but the series as a whole, I loved. So just a lot of fun. Each book takes a different fairy tale and retells it in a science fiction setting. So Cinder obviously is Cinderella, Scarlet is Little Red Riding Hood, Cress is Rapunzel, and Winter is Snow White. So starting with Cinder, we mainly get her story, but as the story continues to weave throughout all 4 novels, their lives intersect and each book adds on the previous book. So by Winter, it's all 4 characters. It was just super creative and a lot of fun. It wasn't like writing that's going to blow me away, but I really enjoyed the story of these. Number 7 is going to be Wolf by Ryan Graudin. You know, if you watch my channel at all, that I love historical fiction, especially set in World War II era. So Wolf by Wolf already called to me because it's an alternate history of World War II. So it's as if the Nazis won. And it's about this girl, Yael, who we meet her at the very beginning in a concentration camp. She had some experiments done on her which make her a skin shifter. So she joins up with the resistance. Her role is to enter this motorcycle race that goes all the way through Europe into Japan and win, because winning means that she'll get the chance to meet Hitler, and her job is to kill Hitler. So there are some twists along the way. It is edge of your seat exciting. I love the other characters that we meet along the way. It was super creative. Nothing that I had read before, and I love it. Number 6 is The Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom Duology by Leigh Bardugo. And these, I'm sure you've heard about if you watch BookTube at all. I love them. It's a cast of 6 characters who ends up going on a heist in Six of Crows and then adventure in Crooked Kingdom. I love the world that Leigh Bardugo builds. She builds such an intricate and detailed world. You don't spend a lot of time having to read through the world building because they're very character driven. So you learn about the world through what the characters experience and their activities along the way. So I loved that about it. I really grew to care about each of the characters that are involved here. There's a lot of humor involved and a lot of trust between the 6 of them that is built. It's just beautiful friendship that gets developed between this ragtag crew of criminals. Number 5 on my list is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and I've talked about this quite a bit. I'm not going to spend too much time, but this is a beautifully atmospheric book about competition between 2 magicians, and there's just the right amount of romance and just the right amount of action, but the star of the show for sure is the circus and the setting that is developed in this book. The writing is fantastic, and you really feel like you're there listening to the sounds and smelling the smells and seeing the sights. Some of the tents that are described are just magical. Well, it is magical, but it really was a joy and a pleasure to read through this. I will say that it's not at the top of my list because the beginning of it was a little bit hard because of the timeline changing around. It was hard to figure out where I was and when I was. But once I got to know the characters a little bit more, that cleared itself up quite quickly, and I flew through it. It was fabulous. Loved it. Number 4. Number 4 is by Ruta Sepetes, and it's Between Shades of Grey. This one's about a girl named Lena who's from Latvia, and it's during World War II, and it's about the relocation of Latvians to Siberia in Russia, which is an aspect of World War II that we don't think about very often or hear about really ever. It's very interesting to read this story through this young teenager's eyes of her family and friends being transported. Similarly, in the way to Jewish people were transported, they were kind of thrown into cattle cars and taken on a train to Siberia, and they have to experience horrors upon horrors, and yet their relationships with each other and Lena's point of view is just beautiful to read. Fantastic book, and among my top of World War II fiction books that I have ever read. And third is The Light Between Oceans by M.L. Stedman. This is about a man and a woman who are lighthouse keepers on an isolated island off the coast of Australia. A fishing boat washes up to shore, and in the boat is a baby and a dead man. They kind of raise this baby as their own for a number of years, but then they meet the birth mom. That's when this ethical dilemma begins to happen, more for the husband than the wife. She is convinced the best thing for the little girl is to keep her. They're all that she knows. They're her parents. That's what she knows, and that's what's best for her. The husband, on the other hand, waffles between, should we return this girl to her birth mother? And it really begins to eat at him, and I love that dilemma, that confusion, that pulling of what's right and what's wrong in the situation. And while I don't always agree with the choices that they made, I understand the dilemma that they had. And I thought it was really beautifully written, that push and pull of right and wrong in this book. I don't hear it talked about too much on BookTube, so I'm not sure what people think about it, but I absolutely loved it. Number 2 is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This book you've probably heard about all over on lots of people's top 10 list, because if they read it this year, it's probably among their favorite, because this book is spectacular. It's about a little boy named Connor who is dealing with a mother who is very ill, and one night a monster comes to his window and begins to tell him stories. It's gonna take your heart and squeeze it and twist it dry. It really, anybody who has experienced grief in any way, I would recommend this book 100%. And even if you haven't experienced grief in such a severe way, this book is so helpful. I think it shows the anger that grieving can bring sometimes, the loneliness that grieving can bring. It's such an accurate picture, and well, it's making me emotional. And I completely related to this little boy. I've lost some dear loved ones in my life, and this brought some of those emotions right back to the surface for me. And it was just absolutely, absolutely stunning. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Please read this book. And my number one favorite book of the year, it's The Nightingale. You're probably not surprised, but I'm going to actually put the picture up because I like the cover and I don't have the cover. I told so many people to read this book and they did, and they loved it. And it's a World War II historical fiction about these two sisters who live in France. These two sisters are kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum. One of them is a mom, and her husband has to go off to fight the war, and she stays home to protect her daughter. The younger sister, on the other hand, is a lot more impulsive and ends up joining the resistance and really gets mad. The sisters clash quite a bit in this book. She gets mad at her sister for just sitting back and seemingly doing nothing, which isn't really the case, but that's in her eyes what she sees. And she joins the resistance and does her part to help rescue people and get them out of the country, out of German-occupied France at the time. So this book was beautifully written. Every once in a while I would read a sentence that I just loved. I think Kristin Hannah is a fantastic storyteller. I'm really looking forward to reading more of her books, and that was my favorite book of 2016. I know you're probably tired of watching these best and worst videos, but thanks for humoring me and allowing me to share my favorites and least favorites with you. I would love to chat with you down in the comments. Even if you have different opinions than me, I love to hear what were some of your favorites or least favorites, or if you agree or disagree. Let's chat down in the comments and let's look ahead to a great 2017. I'll be talking to you soon. Bye!